Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Pedone, and I am the founder of SalesBuzz.com. And today, what we're going to talk about is cold calling versus warm calling. Now, here's why I'm going to share my screen with you. Here's why I want to talk about this subject here. So just bear with me for a second. I'm going to share my entire screen. All right, we'll get rid of this. So watch this. If you do a Google search for, first of all, can everybody see my screen before I jump in there? Let me pop open the chat box. Can you guys see the screen? Right, where the Google, yep, okay, perfect. All right, excellent. So if you do a Google search for cold call versus warm calls, and then you're going to see, people ask, what's the difference between cold calling and warm calling? And so watch this here. So there's this definition, it's one of the top definitions on Google, according to Google, right? Cold calling is calling someone or some group with whom you have had no previous contact in regarding to your service, product, or company. So far, so good. Then it goes on to say warm calling is following up on another contact you've had with a prospect, organization, or customer. This is absolutely false. Now, if we dig deeper into something like this, right? So we look at this article, and I'm not trying to flame this person, but if we scroll all the way down to the author, Liam Berry, who is a branded content editor, how many cold calls do you think Liam has made in his life? I'm going to say 0, right? And this is the problem with I mean, even LinkedIn, which advertises their LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which I love and I use, by the way, but they mislead sales reps by saying they go ahead and do so by saying things like, don't make cold calls, use LinkedIn to warm the prospect up, send them an email, things of that nature. And nothing could be farther from the truth in this scenario. Okay, again, these are 99% of the time, these articles are written by somebody that doesn't know what they're talking about or has never made a cold call. And the reason why this is such a pet peeve for mine is because I have been a straight commission sales rep forever and a day. And the problem is I know how bad it hurt my earning potential as a straight commission sales rep when I got bad sales advice, or I got misled, or if I took advice from somebody that it sounded like they had authority and they thought they knew what they're talking about. It kind of made sense, but then you try to go down that route and it doesn't pan out. And then when you're a straight commission sales rep, meaning there's no base salary, right? Most salespeople today have a base salary that can pay their bills. So I'm coming from the perspective that you are not able to if you don't hit your numbers, you don't make any money that week. You can't eat, right? So my elevation level, my fear factor was really high because I had to be really good very quickly. Does this make sense so far? Are you guys with me on this? So this is why when I see bad sales advice, I know the negative effects that it could have on somebody. So the thing is this, let's just get something out of the way here real quick. I don't need to share the screen anymore. So let me turn that off for a second. As soon as I find it. Okay, stop sharing. There we go. So when it comes to cold, first of all, here's the thing. The definition of a cold calling is contacting any prospect that is not currently raising their hand. Can we agree to that? The definition of a cold call is contacting any prospect that is not currently raising their hand. By the way, that could also mean you're contacting an existing account or an existing client that is not currently raising their hand. If you have somebody that you've done business with in the past and they paid you in the past, they've used your service or your product, and they're not raising their hand, and you want to see if you can get a reorder out of them, you call them out of the blue, right? If you do that, then you're still cold calling them because they weren't raising their hand. The definition of a warm lead is being in contact with a prospect that is raising their hand. They go ahead and sorry about that. I'm getting interrupted by my hockey player daughter here. I don't know if you guys, it's a good thing I turned my screen off. The instant message keeps coming up. My apologies. She's off at college right now. Yes. So with that being said, let me get back to this. So the definition with the warm lead is they're raising their hand. They fill out a form. They go ahead and whether it's a quote request or a free trial or something of that nature, that is a warm lead. Now, what do cold calls and warm leads have in common? What do cold calls and cold calls and warm leads have in common? Think about this for a second. So whether you're cold calling somebody where you have a name and a number and an email address, whatever, where you did research and you found that they meet your ICP, your ideal customer profile, right? Okay, so you're going to cold call them, or a warm lead where they fill out a form, say they're interested in pricing. What do they have in common? You still have to make a first time outbound call to them, correct? Does that make sense? It's still right? They fill out a form. Hey, I'm interested in pricing. That form gets routed to you. You still have to contact them for the first time. If it's a cold call, you still have to contact them for the first time. It doesn't matter the lead temperature. And by the way, some of you are saying, well, I warm the leads up by sending them an email first. Okay, that might warm them up for, you think that's warming them up, but how is that warming up if they're not raising their hand, if there was no interest there? Does that make sense? And the problem that I have with sending an email first and then calling is most often, not always, but most often, the sales rep in that scenario will send an email first and follow up 2 or 3 days later. And what do they say? Hey, I'm calling the phone. Did you get my email? Right. So that's their opening value statement. And then if it's the answer is usually what? No, right? Because they just deleted it, ignored it, where they get a ton of them. And now you're off to a bad start. You already wasted time. And now you're fighting uphill. And that's because you might have read somewhere that, hey, it's a good idea to warm them up by sending them an email first. In my opinion, the only type of email you should be using to warm a prospect up is when you're providing something in a drip marketing campaign style, where you're feeding them solutions without asking for anything in return. Okay, so like it's like every Tuesday I have a newsletter that goes out that just gives advice on how to handle very specific sales challenges. I don't ask for anything in return. If you're on that list, you just get it. But then if somebody reads that and it just happens to be good timing, I got like 40,000 people on the list, right? Somebody reads that and then they go, oh, you know what? We didn't hit our quota last month. We actually hit the month before that. Something has to change. And then they go and request a quote. Now I'm going to call them for the first time. That's a warm lead. Does that make sense? All right. Ishan is asking, what about a referral lead? Here's this. I love this question. There are 2 types of referral leads. Okay. There's a type of referral lead where you call your best clients and you say, who do you know? Where you put them on the spot. And the problem with that is, one, how many times can you call your best client and put the squeeze on them to cough up some names before they don't want to take your calls anymore? Not too many times, right? So, but let's say you do that and you call them and you have them cough up some names and they give you 2 or 3 names. The other problem with that is, just because they are your client does not mean that they always know who your ideal client, your ICP, your ideal customer profile is, right? So that doesn't mean that they might be giving you a couple of names. They might not even be qualified yet. So then when you follow up with that, or actually it's the wrong terminology, when you actually call the referral, when you actually contact them, right? Now you made 2 cold calls, one to your client to get a referral, and the second one to the other person. It's still a cold call because that referral was not raising their hand in that scenario. Now, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, that used to be a very effective strategy, is one way to try to get these things done. But then again, I just showed you a few ways of why there's always a flip side of the coin, that could be a bad thing, right? An inbound referral is where somebody's on the golf course, they're meeting they're having a an outing with one of their friends, and they're both CEOs or something of that nature, and they were sharing, hey, I just solved this problem, I use this, and they go, man, I have that same problem, you recommend them? Yes, I do. Here's their number. And they call you. It's an inbound lead, and they go, hey, I had a meeting with so and so, they're using you for this, I'm interested. That's an inbound warm lead. Make sense? Even though it's a referral. But the other type of referral is still a cold call. Got it? Now, there's nothing wrong. By the way, there's nothing wrong with this. That the issue that can be so negative to a lot of sales reps when it comes to cold calling and warm calling is, I cannot tell you how many times I'm on LinkedIn and I see in a group chat and the subject of cold calling will come up, and sales reps will say, oh, I don't do cold calling. I only do referrals. And if I dig a little bit, I go, okay, so your referrals, are the referrals calling you out of the, I mean, is like they're like fish jumping into the boat, right? You're just you've done such a great job and your clients love you so much that they're just sending people left and right? Or are you reaching out to your clients and then trying to get names? Oh no, I'm reaching out to my clients. Okay, so then you're reaching out to them, you're making a cold call to your client, and then you're putting them on the spot, and then you're getting some, then you're cold calling the other person, because based on the definition we agreed to, that's a cold call. And now they're like, oh yeah. And if that's what you want to do, and if that's being successful, I'm okay with that. The problem is there's so many people that say, hey, they're resistant to cold calling, that I don't cold call. They're afraid to cold call. The other problem is that they're actually doing things like cold calling. They're researching a prospect, which you absolutely should be doing. You should not be calling a list of leads unless they pre-match your ICP, your ideal customer profile. So you have to know what that is first. Nothing's going to burn a sales team out faster than cold calling prospects that don't meet your ICP. With that being said, the last thing I want to do is cold call all day. Can we be honest about that? I mean, you're in sales, right? Your job is to make sales. How many of you, want to cold call? I had to do it, and I still have to do it at times if marketing isn't bringing enough inbound leads. So I find it better to truly help people understand the definition between a cold call and a warm call, and overcome that fear of cold calling. And then if they have to cold call, by the way, I noticed nobody answered. How many of you guys want to cold call? I mean, I know a lot of you do it every day. How many? All right, let's do it this way. If you had a choice of handling inbound warm leads or cold calling, which would you sign up for? You want the inbound warm leads, right? Well, the majority of you want the inbound warms. I know that's what I would want. Now there are some, Glenn Gary, I love it, Angelica. There are some, when it comes to inbound warm leads, you don't control the quality of them. You still have to qualify them. That's a whole other conversation, because a lot of sales reps think if it's an inbound lead, it's already qualified. They're ready to buy, and the sales rep skips a bunch of steps and goes right to the demo or the presentation, sends a proposal, puts it in the pipeline. They never took the time to find out if that person was an intern collecting information, or if how many decision makers there were, or what the pain points were, or anything, right? And so that's why you build this pipeline that doesn't close, because the salesperson is skipping steps. The good news is this: whether it's an inbound warm lead or an outbound cold call, if you want to be a top salesperson, the steps are the same, right? Now, but back to my question earlier, I said, what would you rather have, inbound warm leads or cold calls? Most of you want inbound, and I would as well. The reality is we don't always have enough quality inbound leads to hit our numbers. Agreed? Now, if you're one of the lucky scenarios where you're in a situation where your company is spending the money and doing the marketing, they're getting enough inbound warm leads to hit your number, totally fine. You're handling inbound warm leads. But if you're not, you still have to do cold calling. And it's helpful to understand that there's nothing wrong with the cold call. It's just make sure you're properly identifying, is it a warm lead or a cold call? Doesn't matter. I still have to do an outbound call for the first time to them, but don't be shy of making cold calls. If anything, if the thought of making a cold call scares you to death, then what I would recommend is to go ahead and simply learn how to cold call better. Doesn't that make sense? I mean, you realize that what you say after hello, my name is, there really is a formula out there that you can fix on the spot like that. And by the end of today, after this webinar, if you learned how to make an opening value statement, whether you're cold calling or warm calling, you can start getting more conversations. There really is a formula for that. As a matter of fact, let's just do this. And I'll take some questions here in a second. I don't need to spend an hour or even a half hour on the definition of cold call versus warm call. I just find that if you really understand the difference between the two, and the warm call, like we just showed you, is not that content writer who says it's you following up with somebody, right? That's not the case. Sure, they might be warm at that point, but that's not the definition. The definition of a warm lead is when they raise their hand. All right, but the thing I want to show you is this here. Let me just share my screen again. All right. You see this right here? You see this try for free? If you guys see that, that's actually the first course out of my program right here that I give away for free. It'll actually show you step by step how to create an opening value statement, what to say after hello, my name is, that it's customized to your industry, so you can avoid eliminating things like no thanks, not sure, we're all set. I mean, the reason why sales reps fear that phone is because they try something new all the time of what to say after hello, my name is, and they get rejection upon rejection upon rejection. And then eventually they don't want to pick up the phone anymore. So what happens then? They read an article or two on somebody on LinkedIn that makes sense to them. And so what they do is they send email after email. Now you're sending tons of emails and you're getting very little ROI back on the email. It's so much better to build. I would rather you have, instead of 1,000 leads, I'd rather you have 250 that you went through, made sure they met all your ICP, and then you called each one and you just went through the list. And if it took you, if you did $60 in one day, 60 in the next, and you just kept rotating until you went through all of them, right? And then after you call, voicemail, send an email, you're going to get way better results. But again, yes, here, I'll show it to you. If you just go to here, if you go to salesforce.com and you hit the resource, you go try for free, you'll get that first free class and it'll help you out tremendously. With that being said, I'm going to I see some hand raisers here, so hold on one second. Hey, Caitlin, how are you? I'm going to head and unmuting you there. How can I help? Caitlin, can you hear me? Oh, hold on, Caitlin. Your mute is still on, Caitlin. If you want to take it off, let me see if I can take it. Ask to unmute. There you go. And if anybody else has a question, I'll be more than happy to take their call as well. Or Caitlin, if you don't want to talk, you can put your question in there, right? And now, Sarah, I love where you say you like to cold call sometimes. You need that high energy. Absolutely, absolutely. I agree. Okay, Caitlin says she's sorry. She didn't mean to raise her hand. No problem. Let me put that down. All right. With that being said, anybody else have any other questions? I'll be more than happy to go ahead and take them right now. But the reason why I really wanted to bring this up is for you guys to go ahead and understand the differences between the two, not be afraid of the cold call, and also learn what to say if you have to do it, how to create your opening value statement. And I can give that to you for free right on there. You just go to the website and that'll help you tremendously. Fair enough? You guys good? All right, guys, go ahead and do that. If you have any questions about it, feel free to reach back out to us. And if you want, if you have some questions on cold calling or even warm calling or even inbound leads, here's the thing. I touched on this before. If it's an inbound lead, you want to make sure that you handle it properly, stay in control, and not go ahead and just skip steps. If I get an inbound lead, whether they call in or they fill out a form, let's say they call in. Hi, yes, and let's say it's a referral. Hi, yes, I was speaking with so-and-so and they mentioned they use your service. So I'm interested in getting some information about that. Great, my name is Michael. Who am I speaking with? This is John. Hey, John, nice to meet you. Listen, do you mind if I ask you a few questions first to make sure what we offer would be a good fit for you? Would that be okay? Yeah, sure. Who says no to that? In all of my years of with Sales Buzz alone, which I technically started in 2008, really got off the ground to 2010. But let's say for all that time, I only had one person say no to that because they actually said, no, actually, we decided we already wanted to buy. I just need to know this. So I wasn't going to walk past the close, right? So I just said, oh, okay, sure, answer their question and wrapped it up. But for the most part, when I go, hey, do you mind if I ask you a few questions to make sure what we have to offer would be a good fit for you? Would that be okay? I call this, I'm still peaking. The interest is peaked because they were an inbound lead, right? Because your opening value statement has to do two things. That's to peak interest, gain permission to continue the call, right? So when I do it that way, and the interest is already there, but I'm taking control, but I'm taking control by giving it away. I'm asking their permission if I can ask them some questions, but notice how I front load it with the what's in it for them statement. If you want to be able to ask them some questions, they have to see the value in it first. They have to see the what's in it for them. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions to make sure what we have to offer be a good fit for you? Would that be okay? They see the benefit in that. They don't want to spend money on something that's not a good fit. If it's a cold call, I'm doing the same thing. Hey, John, it's Michael Pedone at salesbuzz.com. Listen, the reason for my call, I recently helped competitor X, their team overcome call reluctance, and they're now setting 25% more appointments each month. There's a possibility I might be able to help your team do the same. I just need to ask you a few questions first to be sure. Well, would that be okay? I mean, who's going to say no to that? If I just mentioned a competitor of theirs that I help and they're setting 25% more appointments by overcoming, I showed them quickly how to overcome call reluctance, chances are they're going to say, yeah, I got a second, go ahead, right? Same thing on that inbound warm lead. I gain that permission to continue the call, and then you better know exactly what questions you need to ask next and what the purpose of those questions are. Listen, sales There's there's a science to it, but it's not rocket science. There really is a step-by-step formula that no matter what industry you're in, I just proved it on the opening value statement, right? If you look at what I just said, and for my industry, when I used what's called the competition template, I mentioned a competitor of theirs I just helped because I'm cold calling, which means I'm researching other clients or prospects that match one of the clients I just got really good results for. So I'm building that list. I'm finding out who I need to call. Now I build the list. I'm calling them. I use that. So I call it the competition template. I pique their interest. I gain permission to continue the call. And now I know exactly what my next question is going to be once they say, yeah, sure, I got a second, go ahead. I know my second question, my third question. I know everything about the sales script that is, it's actually a playbook that I have outlined before I ever picked up the phone. This is how you get rid of call reluctance. This is how you fill the pipeline. This is how you shorten the sale. This is how you get above quota. The problem is in today's world, most salespeople, there's no formal training. Their sales managers are way too busy to train. Half of them were promoted because they were a good sales rep, but they just had intuition. And now that they're a good sales rep, you can't teach intuition, so they're struggling. So it's a big mess. But when you learn the step-by-step sales process, and you don't need advanced sales training unless you are above quota for like 6 months in a row. You or your team does not need advanced sales training. Advanced sales training is for people that are at their peak level and they want to squeeze that little extra bit out of it. Everybody else that's below that, they need to go back to the basics. What is your opening value statement's job? What's it supposed to do? That free course is going to show you. That's going to show you how to create it. Then you have to know what the next step is, and then the next step, and the next step. And once you just put the pieces together, sales is fun. Cold calling is fun. Actually, you can actually make it fun because you know what to do. And then when you get those inbound leads and you use the same process, now you're really killing it. And guess what? At least I don't know how it is today, but when I first got into my very first job as an inside sales straight commission inside sales rep, I started on the coldest of cold leads. I've been called a million times, and I had to close a couple of those before they would trust me to give me an inbound lead. And when you got that inbound lead, you better make sure you close it, right? But that's how you get that confidence from your manager, because you start nailing the cold callings and you're getting the pipeline and you're closing those deals. Now they can use the same formula. You're going to be able to entrust, and that they're going to be able to entrust you with the warm leads. All right, before we wrap up, I got a couple of questions here. When you have two decision makers, 50-50%, and you cannot get them together on every call or meeting, is there any particular strategy to pursue even in terms of first contact, or just go for either one? This is a great question. So whether it's an inbound warm lead or an outbound call, first of all, my process is this. If I get the one person on the phone, I don't have to have both there right out of the gate in the first call, right? So let's say it's a cold call. Well, first of all, let me just, Sal, are you doing cold calls or are you handling inbound warm leads in that scenario? I just want to make it as relevant to you as possible, right? So since you asked that question, are you doing inbound or is it outbound? And again, that was the question to Sal, right? Sal, let's just pick one. Let's just say you're doing an inbound lead, right? Okay, since you get both. So somebody calls in, they're raising their hand, it's a warm lead. You call them for the first time. What I would say is I understand you're interested and then I would bring up what pain point you solve. And then I go, I'm assuming you're probably interested in seeing what our pricing structure looks like and if we have any incentives available. There's a possibility I might be able to help you with this. I just need to ask you some questions first to be sure. Would that be okay? And they're like, oh yeah, sure. Now notice, that's my warm lead first time call, because if it's a warm lead, they want to know three things. They're curious about what type of results they could get with your solution, what the pricing looks like, and if any incentives are available. So my opening value statement, I'm going to hit that. That's the play I'm going to run for an inbound lead, because I'm touching all their hot buttons of what they're most interested in at that point. So it's going to be real easy to get a yes. I go, but I just need to ask you a few questions first to be sure. Would that be okay? They go, yeah, sure. So now I'm going to ask once I get yes, I'm going to ask my engagement question, identify opportunity size, uncover the pain point, problems, buying motives. Right? Those are going to be my first couple of questions I'm going to ask. Once I got that, now I'm going to run to the role of the person I'm speaking with. And there's 5 roles that every prospect you ever speak to, there's going to be 5 roles that they're going to fit into. They're either the ultimate decision maker, part of the decision-making team, influencer, end user, or information gatherer. So in your case, Saul, you're talking about if they're part of the decision-making team, right? So they have a vote, you need and want their vote, but their vote alone doesn't get the deal done. Correct? All right. So then, so at least I identify that early. And then I run what I call the fast forward technique is I go, because this is after I got the pain point and we confirm what the problem is. And I go, so I go, so other than yourself, who else is involved in the decision-making process when it comes to something like this? If they say, well, whether they say it's just them or if they say nobody, I still run the fast forward technique. And I go, well, assume for a moment you end up liking what it is we have to offer. Let's say you decide you want to move forward with this. What happens next? Where do we go from there? What does the purchasing process look like at that point? Well, if they said that they were the decision maker, but then I run that fast forward technique and they go, well, if I like it, I have to take it to my boss for so and so. Guess what? I expose them without putting their guard up that they're really not the decision maker. So then I'm going to have to dig a little bit deeper, right? If they go, oh, well, if they go, well, if I like it, I take it, so and so, anything above XYZ, I have to have my partner sign off on it. And I'll say, okay, great. My next question is very important for you, Saul, right? So then notice I'm doing all these things in order, right? So then I'm going to say, if I'm in that scenario where I have somebody as part of the decision-making team, I want to find out, just out of curiosity, is this something that they asked you to look into, or are you just taking the bull by the horns? That is going to be determine if you should move forward with just that person for now, or if you need to hold tight and get them both parties involved. If they go, yeah, no, they didn't ask me to look, and I was trying to take the bull by the horns, and they can't make a decision, I'm gonna say, listen, I'd love to help you. This is where you have to cowboy up. Listen, I'd love to help you. The problem is this: is if we move forward. Well, first of all, I have good news and bad news, Saul. If we move forward like we're, right now, and I just explained things to you, you stand almost zero chance of getting the solution you're after to help you solve XYZ. XYZ is the pain point that I uncovered early on before I got to this point. This is one of the reasons why you want the pain point. So if I get in this scenario, I can push that hot button. The what's in it for them, the pain point, right? So I go, you stand almost no chance of getting it. However, if we hit the pause button and we set up a call where it's you and so-and-so all together, and I explain how it works, and then I can answer any questions you have, you stand about 95% chance of getting what you're after to help you solve this problem. So how do so I don't know if he's available to hop on the call right now, or, do you want to set up a meeting? What do you recommend? And again, I'm making it as if it's their decision, as if they're in control. I paint the picture of why it would be a bad idea if we move forward, why it'd be a good idea if we got them both involved. Does this make sense? Now, I can rattle these things off just like this because I've been doing it forever and I've studied each scenario. It's like a roadmap. I know, okay, if I hit a detour, I have to go around this way. Does that make sense? And listen, I understand I'm going a little fast on this, so you'll be able to go back and re-listen to this. If you want more detailed explanation of all this, obviously it's in the course, but that's not why we're here today. We're off topic just a little bit, but I wanted to get to the cold call and warm call and then answering your questions, but hopefully solve that gave you some things to think about. All right. Matt had one question. Any advice on capital equipment, sales, initial cold calls, large ticket items that are used for 8 to 10 years? Yeah, absolutely. You have to know who your target audience is, Matt. By the way, I get phone calls all the time for companies wanting to offer me capital to grow my business. So yours is really not that much different, a little bit. It's capital equipment for you're offering capital for equipment, right? We're talking tractor trailers, things of that nature, right? I have a couple of clients that I've helped in this scenario. You have to know it always starts with this. What's the ICP, the ideal customer profile? So you build that list, right? What characteristics do they have that would meet them to be pre-qualified? Then you have to know what problems they're facing that your solution solves. And then you have to know that your opening value statement's job is to pique interest first, not to explain everything that you do, not to do a full presentation, just agitate that pain just enough. So we would have to dig in a little bit on what your USP, your unique selling proposition is. But for me, notice when my opener, I didn't say the reason for my call is I offer sales training, because they could stop me right there and go, well, we already have something in-house, right? But if I go, the reason for my call, I recently helped competitor A overcome call reluctance, and now they're setting 25% more appointments a month, right? They can't say, well, we already have that, because I know if they have a team of 5 to 10 sales reps, minimum, at least half of them are suffering from call reluctance. So even though they already have a solution, a sales training solution in-house, they're still suffering from call reluctance. They're going to want to hear what I have to say. So if you call and say we offer capital for equipment sales, you have to find that pain point and agitate it from there. Make sense? Okay, and it's medical capital equipment. I see that now. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. All right. Excellent, guys. All right. Listen, we need to roll because we're at the 2:30 mark. If you have any other questions, you can hit me up through LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to help you. And again, if you need help with your opening value statement, by all means, you can take the free course. And if you decide you want to access the rest of it, you can go ahead and do so from there as well. All right. Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. You're welcome. All right, Jamie, you got it. Matt, you're welcome. Caitlin, excellent. I hope you guys found this helpful. All right. Take care. You're welcome, Saul.